Welcome back to the Gooner Fanzine Arsenal Woman podcast. Got a special guest alongside me today. Delighted to welcome Arsenal Woman historian and Gooner contributor Adam Salter to the podcast. Adam, how are things?
Things are very well, Freddie, and thanks for the intro. If it hasn't already, that's definitely going on my Twitter bio or Blue Sky bio, whatever it is the social media norm is now. Yes, it's been a good week, and looking forward to this.
Yeah, we're going to talk about all of your work, but we have to touch on some bad news. First of all, Leah Williamson set to miss the start of the WSL season because of a knee injury she suffered in the Euro 2025 final. So this was discovered at Arsenal Women's Media Day today, where Williamson was seen on crutches. I mean, they could have stuck her away in another room and hid her, but obviously she's going to be in high demand for commitments, and there was no way Arsenal were going to keep that quiet. Arsenal have got a couple of friendlies, Saturday, Tottenham, and then Wednesday against West Ham. Both of those are at Meadow Park, both open to the public as well, although Saturday won't be streamed because it's a 3 p.m. kickoff in the UK. Adam, your take on the Williamson injury? I never
Yeah.
nice to lose her, but Arsenal you
No,
feel should have the squad depth in that position, shouldn't they?
we are blessed with a lot of Ruben Moy and Steph Catley, like Adina. Hopefully, she's got over her injury issues as well. We should be fine. I'm just devastated. I'm hoping to be there on the Saturday, and I'm not going to see our Champions League winning defender, our Euro winning captain in defence. But at least it's now, and it's not a long-term injury, so hopefully we can get back into the team as quick as possible. Just won't be there for the LCL game, which is a shame.
Mm. So moving on then, your work with Arsenal Women's history and the Arsenal Women Archive is the page, and of course your page as well on Blue Sky and Twitter too. Where did it all begin for you? I guess first your journey with Arsenal Women, and then what made you really delve into the history side of it?
It's a long story, probably longer than this podcast will probably allow. So I'll try and do a shortcut through it. So firstly, from my personal perspective, I love history. Always loved history growing up. Love reading up in the past and finding out how things have happened, how we got from A to B to C. And especially as an Arsenal fan, I came to Arsenal at a point in time after, from a men's perspective, we'd won a lot of trophies, so I missed out on a lot of the glory. So a lot of my fun is going back through and trying to find out how we won stuff, but also how we didn't win stuff. And that's always been fascinating to me. And one of the big things with the women's game is that a lot of that information just isn't there, which is incredibly frustrating. You hear a lot about the past and some of the things that happened in the past in the early years of Vic Akers, and that content simply isn't there. And that for me is a bit of a frustration. But it was kind of sort of an accepted norm that the information just doesn't exist, so then you're not going to find out. And I think, which to me is like, challenge accepted. So I came into the Arsenal Women. It came onto my radar around about 2007. That's when I first learned about it, because occasionally I show FA Cup finals on TV. Properly got involved around 2019 when I actually started to go into the games. And then during lockdown, I tried to use that time to sort of research the team, because I realized I didn't know much about them. And that got me into going through the highlight videos on like the Arsenal website and on YouTube. And then that got me into trying to sort of capture that footage, because what I soon learned is that a lot of that footage disappears. If it's highlights on the BBC website or copyright issues and people lose the videos on YouTube. And I realized that that history is disappearing in my hands. So I need to capture it before it disappears again. And then I got a copy of it. And that slowly and slowly and slowly evolved until it got to the point where I was like, I should try to get everything. Okay. And so there was a channel. Well, it still exists. It's been rebranded. You may have noticed that the WSL has been rebranded. It used to be called, I think it was called FAWSL. It was just simply that. And it had highlights of all the WSL games from its inception in 2011 to midway through the 2017-18 season. So I thought, well, that's a really good resource, and go through there. I can see a lot of the old games, WSL games, League Cup games, or Conti Cup as they were called, WSL Cup, and then some, I think it's an FA Cup game in there as well. So I captured all that footage, and about a few months later, every video on the site got unlisted, which means no one can watch it. They just disappeared unless you've got the link to that video. Those of you who follow YouTube will know this. Unless you have a direct link to that video, which is YouTube and a bunch of random characters, that content is lost forever. And then I realized, hang on a minute, I'm sitting on a lot of just the Arsenal games, I should stress, I don't have the other games. I'm sitting on a load of highlights that have just been disappeared. And that's sort of how the Arsenal Women Archive came about. I discovered in the build up to the Euros, I've done something similar, trying to share a lot of old England goals in tournaments, and that proved quite popular. So whereas, well, hang on a minute, I've got a means of sharing history that a lot of people can't get now, and a lot of people I think would be interested in and know about. People love talking about old games and games they went to as a kid and or growing up. People have memories. I should have a massive shout out to Tim Stillman, who obviously went to a lot of his games and has a lot of photos, and is always happy to share his photos and share the videos that go out. And it sort of snowballed from then. And I realized, hang on a minute, I now need to try and find every game possible. And as it stands, I have footage, I think, from all but 2 of the WSL games in Arsenal's history.
Wow.
I respect that I will not get every footage of every game because not every game had a TV camera mounted filming it, just how it was at the time. But from I've got I think a decent amount of content, and at the end of this year that will end. It's up there. I'm not looking so used to recycle stuff, but that's going to end. The only stuff that will get added will be any new stuff I find. But I think what is up there on YouTube, Twitter, and Blue Sky is there. Through that work, I crossed paths with a chap called Chris Garrett, who people on social media will know as Talkie Groundhopper. He's a regular at the Arsenal game, sits in the North Bank. Quite the character. We've had a few chats down the years, and he was also a massive history buff. He's been going to games and he's got loads of programs at home, and he's been trying to record all this data about appearances, goals, who played, team sheets, just everything. And he just had he swapped notes. He had this massive payload of data, and he wanted to do something with it. And we've been umming and ahhing what we're going to do, whether it be maybe a social media site where we could just tweet stats, or maybe a website. And the epiphany, I don't know how it came about, because I think back to it now and it's complete madness. But the epiphany came, it was after we had a game last season away at the LSV. We drew 1-1 with Manchester United, and I was in my hotel room just after the game. And as I always, I'm bored on Wikipedia. And someone had half built one of the previous seasons. It might have been like 2016 season. And I realized, hang on a minute, I've got all this information here. Why don't I just complete it myself? And then it just became, well, why don't I just write out the history of Arsenal on Wikipedia with all the resources I've got and data I've got, going back so far. I've got match report links on the Arsenal website, pictures of programs showing match reports. And so it kind of snowballed, and then it just became, I would say, a dangerously level obsession of trying to see how far could I push this boat before I run out of data and I can't do it anymore. And I think it took about 4 to 6 months, and I got to the end, which is 1987, which is when Vic Akers founded the club. And I realized I'd got every season in. The level of detail depreciates with time, just naturally because how the resources are available. But then it got to the point of every season, up to 1991 too, every game that we know and result, and every competition. After that, it's very vague. We don't really have the information, and it just sort of became sort of my life, and it sort of still is, because it's not a never ending. It has no end game, because there's always more to find out. There's mistakes need to clear up, but then more resources become available, kind of like with the archive. I think I found every video, and then suddenly I'd find a new source and find a load of highlights I didn't realize existed on YouTube or on old DVDs that people have uploaded. And same with the history stuff, is I'm finding new resources to find stuff. A brilliant resource is the British Newspaper Archive, which I thoroughly recommend. It's got loads and loads of newspapers scanned in, and then they have like a optical character reader where you can type in words and it can detect it in the scans. That's been a brilliant resource for finding out some old stuff about the Arsenal women, and finding out some match report links and match reports that don't exist because at the time a match report will be a small box in a newspaper column that would just say Arsenal won today 1-0, Marianne Spacey. That will be it. That is the only evidence of a game, of a goal scorer, as to anything. And it's finding those tiny breadcrumbs, those grains of sand scattered in the past to pluck one out and think, right, that's my proof that game happened and that was the goal scorer. It's should say, and this is going to maybe lead to later, it's not watertight. So there was a singer called Shaznay T. Lewis who sung for a band called All Saints in the 90s, and they do these things in magazines where they do like fun facts. And her fun fact was that she played for the Arsenal Ladies, which I thought, well, that's a novel, that's an interesting fact, that's fantastic. Only further prying on a news report in I think it was in the Daily Express in 1999, where it turned out actually this was a false rumor. Arsenal had no knowledge of her ever playing for the club. So you've got to make sure anybody listening or watching, if you're doing researching, make sure you have multiple sources, because otherwise you can have a situation where you get led down the garden path. But it's been an incredible journey, like I said, and there's a real sense of sort of pride in getting this data up there because it hadn't existed. And after the Real Madrid game, someone put a post up talking about how, this is like the first time Arsenal done a come back from 2 goals down to win 3-2 or something like that, or to overturn a 2-goal deficit. That was it. Overturn a 2-goal first leg deficit in the Champions League, and they were sharing a picture of the stuff I put on the site of like the match I put up, and I was thinking, this is brilliant. People are using this. People are reading it, and there's a real sense of pride, and it's fantastic that the players of the past, Joe Churchman, Kirsty Peeling, Nazball, the Kelly Smiths, the Rachel Yancey, all the way through. So many and they are finally having their stories told, which until this time last year, that was just, it didn't exist at all. And that was how I ended up becoming an Arsenal women historian, as you eloquently put at the start of the pod, and writing Wikipedia for fun. And I'm still doing it. And because the problem is once you do it with Arsenal, you think, well, what else can I write? And that's kind of where I am now.
There are so many rabbit holes, and I think you're someone who pursues those rabbit holes, aren't you? But I mean, there's so much I'm interested in. There's so much I want to go into. But when you talk about the media coverage, from being sort of a line in a newspaper to what we have now, where I was at the Champions League final, and it was you couldn't move in the press box, and there were journalists there from all over Europe, all over the world, and that must have changed so much, and that must reflect in your research as well. How has that landscape changed in terms of the coverage of Arsenal women and women's football?
It's incredible. Honestly, I should say a shout out, there are journalists in the past who I owe and women's football owe a huge debt of gratitude, because it is often, when you go back through and you're scrounging in the past, going through the Internet Archive, it's another great source, because you can find websites that that no longer exist, but you can trawl through them. It's not reliable, but you do get some gems out of that. It's the same names that come up, the same journalist names come up who have done the reporting, and it's one or two or three people. Without their reporting, when no one else was reading and no one else was listening when they should have been, this information wouldn't exist. And a huge debt of gratitude is owed to them who took the time to do it when no one else did. But it is a fabulous contrast, and there is a to compare, as you say, it's from a footnote in newspaper to the Gooner, fanzines on we're on the Gooner podcast, the Gooner doing stuff on their websites, and then obviously the fanzines, which is websites like She Kicks, fantastic website that's great for plucking out old match report content. The contrast to then and now is great, but there's also an element of, there's always an air of frustration that I wish we could have now what we did then, because then this wouldn't be such a battle. And it meant that there's so much stuff I still don't know. There's so many entries on the Wikipedia where I just don't know who the goal scorers are. I don't know who scored in a game between Arsenal and Croydon that finished 3-3. Just before our FA Cup tie. No idea who scored the goals, no idea who did what happened in that game apart from the scoreline. But I should have another shout out, actually, and this is why Arsenal, I have a lot of respect for Arsenal for doing this, is their men's matchday programs would often have a feature about the women's team. And that is pretty much the primary source for any match reporting before the internet. Because you can see when the internet, say, in terms of Arsenal website reporting, which is around about the late 90s, anything before then is all in the matchday programs, and that highlights the importance of the matchday programs as a resource. And thankfully, there are websites who have put scans of them up, or people have bought them and got photos of them. And it's got, like I said, there's a journey. It's gone from that. It's gone from 3 or 4 reporters who may be at a game or have taken the time to cover multiple games at once, just to let you know who the scorers were, what the results were. And that's an important beacon in the past. And that's why it highlights for me the present. It is so important that this information is preserved. It's so important for likes of yourself, Freddie. When you go to a game, you record the result, you write about the game, you write about the scorers, because 20 years from now, there'll be somebody else who will want to know who scored in, say, this friendly that's coming up against Spurs. They'll want to know how Arsenal won the Champions League final. To again emphasize it further, the Champions League final, we had the UEFA Women's Cup final against Umea. Until very recently, no footage of that final existed. No gameplay footage existed. And specifically, the first leg highlights that Arsenal put up is the first time extensive highlights of that first leg have ever been circulated. And it's just that kind of data that is needed. And thankfully now, we're a bit more open, and Arsenal and other websites and stuff, and the content is there. It's just so important that is kept and preserved in some form so that future generations can look back and enjoy us beating Barcelona in Lisbon. You know, we don't want that information to go missing for 20 years and then pop up when Arsenal happen to reach a Champions League final. So it's not, for me, is going forward now, I'm going on a bit of a ramble, but it is not just about preserving the past, it's also about preserving the present and making sure that what happens now is also preserved for the next 10, 20, 30 years.
Yeah, one thing I love about the Gooner is that every single Gooner edition, and I think Leif can confirm this, you know, going back to the same year Arsenal ladies were founded, actually 1987, which is a lovely sort of synchronicity in that history. But every edition is kept in the British Library of the Gooner Fanzine, which I love, and I think really, you know, shows how respected it is. Tell me about Vic Akers. What do we not know about Vic Akers that perhaps you've come across? And also some of perhaps the misconceptions, I guess, around. I think there's a lot of talk you've seen now from maybe people who don't know the history to the extent that you do, in terms of you often hear it thrown around that Arsenal were a professional club when they won the European Cup and had that success in 2007. And I don't think that was true. So, you know, are there misconceptions like that you come across and correct? And tell me about Vic.
Yeah, so Vic's interesting. One of the things myself and Chris are really, really passionate about finding out is how Arsenal came about. So many clubs have a women's team where they created themselves. It's like a spin-off. What we know, from what little we do know, but thanks to British Newspaper Archive, we've managed to pick some pieces together. Arsenal originally called Aylesbury Ladies, and they were picked up by Vic Akers, who was working at a place called the JVC Centre as part of Arsenal. And under somebody who worked there was called Ali Clement. Without Ali Clement, Arsenal wouldn't exist. Honestly, the history of Arsenal rests on her shoulders because she played for Aylesbury and was working at the centre as a sports leader, and she recommended that Vic Akers take the Aylesbury Ladies under the Arsenal wing because they're a decent side. They're Caroline McGloin, who played for Arsenal in those early 90s, she was playing for Aylesbury Ladies, and that's how Vic Akers absorbed the Aylesbury Ladies team. Vic Akers brought them aboard. They became the Arsenal Ladies and became the team that is the team we now watch and support now. What people may not know, Vic Akers had two spells at the club. In the late 90s, he was also the kit man at Arsenal. He took on that role more, and another chap came in called, if I've got it written down here to make sure I've actually got the right name, Terry Howard. He was in there for a season, and then about near the end of that first season, he mysteriously disappears, and Vic Akers is back in charge and carries on managing. To this day, I have no idea what happened. And this is, again, the frustration is that there's still so much we don't know. Is going through. Arsenal didn't win the league that season. That's kind of maybe a red flag. We did win the FA Cup and the League Cup, both against Croydon, as it happens. But he just mysteriously disappears, and Vic Akers comes back. As far as I know, he very well respected man who took Arsenal from nothing to everything, always looking to push the team. He has and push it further and try and give it the attention he deserves. Should shout out on my archive. There's lots of really good interviews with Vic Akers and some of the funny back and forth between him and Claire Wheatley, who he took from Chelsea, I believe, actually, and came to the club, and she's been at the club since about 1995. Very much part of the fabric, and I think a lot of her footballing career is sadly maybe not appreciated as much because we see her now as the general manager of Arsenal, but she did a lot of great things as a player at the club. He was a really big on pushing the women's team and wanting to be the best it could be. One of the big things he did was there was a thing called Michael Watson Day. For those the really elder Arsenal fans will know this is something that happened. I think it was in 1993. there was a boxer called Michael Watson who suffered a really traumatic injury and also put a fundraiser on. And Vic Akers said, I want our women's team to play in this fundraiser at Highbury. And it was a league game against Doncaster Rovers. It was like first versus second. Over 18,000 came to Highbury to watch that game as Arsenal won 2-1. They went on to win the league. And it was that kind of thinking from Vic Akers of trying to get the women's team on the map. He got them jobs in the club so they could get a proper wage, because obviously the way that money was, a lot of players had to choose between jobs and being a player, and that conflict shouldn't get in the way of you becoming a footballer. So we know the stories of Alex Scott, cleaning Ian Wright's boots in the laundry. A lot of the players had jobs in the club, like Jane Ludlow, Claire Wheatley, as I mentioned. They'd be like first aiders or doing admin roles.
Yeah.
And just he almost like a single-handedly dragged this team forward with no other team, with the exception, I would say, of Fulham in 2003 when they dabbled at being professional and then couldn't. Arsenal went semi-professional. I think it was around sort of 2002, 2003. Can't remember when it was exactly that became fully professional top of my head, but I know that it was mandated only, I think it was in 2018, that all clubs in the WSL had to be fully professional, which when you look at it now is just bonkers. That's the level of progress. But no, a great chap, and he stood down in 2009 with arguably the end of one of the greatest ever seasons when we won the treble. And again, that's something I hope to write about one day. Is another fantastic league season. It's the only season I know to this date, or the last time it's happened, where a team has gone into the final day of the season ahead in the table, top of the table, last game of the season, and not won the league. And for me, and that was in Vic Akers last season. He won the title on the final day, and he obviously stood down, and if he get a job briefly managing the club at a managerial level, and then he stood away completely. But he's still there at Meadow Park. He's still there. He comes to the games, and maybe one day my work will allow me to swap notes with him. But an incredible man who we will forever owe a debt of gratitude. And if there's a statue of Arsene Wenger outside Emirates Stadium, quite frankly, I think it should be a statue of Vic Akers as well.
Yeah, 100%. I interviewed Joe Churchman for, I think it was either our first or our second, maybe our second online issue of the Arsenal Woman Gooner Fanzine. And she told that Michael Watson story and others as well. And it's just incredible. They used to be sort of, they did their fitness sort of drills around the marble halls of Highbury and stuff like that, which is, incredible. And as you say, still goes to the games. He was out in Lisbon and rightly so for the Champions League final. If you were to pinpoint then one game or story where you really, really had to work for it, you had to go to all sorts of depths to find out this information, what would it be?
God, that's a good question. I'll be honest that nothing really springs to my top of my head. What the biggest ones are is the frustrations of not being able to find out information. There was a London County Cup tie back in it was actually the 2007 season, the big Invincibles there, when we won everything, and the information doesn't exist, and we don't know if there was no match reporting or if the game was called off. We just know that Arsenal went through into the next round. There's a few of these dead ends, and there's no matter how much I pile into it and look through, just cannot get the information. There was a County Cup County Cup we had a few one of the early sort of mid 2000 seasons. We know we won the first game, and that's it. We don't know what happens after that. There is just no information. We've got myself and Chris, we've got basically a list of he's got the list, but we have a list going, or tally of all the things we don't know that we want to find out. Why is it we were, some of the stage we moved about half of the season, we moved stadiums and went somewhere else. We don't know why. Trying to find match reports of some of these games. I mentioned the 3-3 against Croydon. I would love to know what happened in that game, and still don't. But we have had a bit of a breakthrough very recently, which I'm happy to exclusively break on the Gooner Fanzine podcast. There's an ex-player who scored 2 goals in the 1995 FA Cup final called Rebecca Lonergan. Marianne Spacey got the winner, as she does, and she's in a shout out I did in one of our group chats to try and see if we can get some more information. Someone in that group in the sports group chat just casually mentioned that, oh, I used to play football with her, and I'm still in contact. And we've been a bit of to and froing, and we've discovered that she's got loads of old match day programs that we don't have, and it's that kind of resource that will end some of these rabbit holes and wild goose chases that I've had to go through to get here. And so hopefully, in a few months' time, once you process it all, there will be some more information and more gaps will be plugged. But there'll always be more gaps to be plugged. There'll always be more footage to be found. If you're talking about the proudest thing from a footage perspective, from an archive perspective, my greatest find, and I stand by it today, is finding highlights of the second leg of the Champions League, the Women's UEFA Cup final, the one at Meadow Park when we actually hit the trophy. And that's because it was hidden on a DVD extra of that was sent out to the fans in like 2007, 2008, that someone had stuck on the Internet Archive, and it was squirreled away right at the back. Proper highlights, Guy Mowbray and commentary of that game. And I'd waited years to see, the ball hit the post and hit Emma Byrne, the miracle saves, the lifting the trophy. That for me is my proudest moment running the archive, and I'm glad that footage is up there. Of course, what happened a few weeks later, Arsenal put the highlights up anyway, so it kind of took the edge off. But for that moment, it's like this, this is finally giving the fans something. And this was, I think it was in the build up to the final we had in Lisbon, so it was kind of all came together rather nicely.
And you've had some good interactions from former players. I'm sure Faye White has sort of shared a couple of videos.
Yeah, there was a funny one. Yeah, that was I can't remember what the circumstances were. It might have been. I think it might have been it was her I think it might have been her birthday or something, or I did like a happy birthday, Faye White. And she scores a really good goal. She got a brace actually in a League Cup tie I think it was 2005 against Charlton Athletic. And the second goal is an absolute screamer from 30 yards. And she emotionally said, "Yeah, I've been telling my kids for years I scored a worldie in a cup final." I was like, fair play. No, I do appreciate that, and I like to do it as a means of, again, telling their stories. A lot of people would never have seen that. A lot of people would not have seen that bit of that clip that was hidden away. I think it was one of those old season review DVDs. Another great resource. Arsenal, when they did their season reviews, used to put a little snippet in about what's happening with the women's team, and sometimes it'd be a goal in the cup final, or even match highlights. But even if just a small window into the past, they've been very useful. Been talking, like I said, I've been talking to some of the ex-players as well. Now in touch with Arsenal, working with the Arsenal team. Some people there who've been at the club since like the early 2000s, who've done like the matchday programs themselves. They're trying to do work, and this is again a bit of a shout out now. They're doing a bit of work trying to get as much of the Arsenal stats together. So talking about like who played for Arsenal. We're trying to work out who are all the players who played for Arsenal women. And again, that sounds insane that we don't know. There are so many, but we don't know, and some of the information has been corrupted in the past. But we're trying to find out. We're trying to find out match appearances and all that sort of stuff. And that's what we're working on now, and we're in touch with them. And so anybody who's listening to the pod, who knows any players who play for Arsenal or has resources, has match day programs, with match reports, do let us know. Do let me know, because we are looking for them, and we want to plug those gaps as much as possible.
Even last season, I remember I had a chat with one of the Arsenal comms teamers before the West Ham game. She said, "Oh, by the way, this actually isn't Kim Little's certain number of appearances. We recalculated it in the week as a team, and we've realised, it was actually 20 games ago she brought this up." So, and that's for the current Arsenal captain who's just won the Champions League. I mean, it shows her longevity, but when you compare it to the men's game in terms of the history, I mean, the disparities must be huge.
Incredible. This is something we discussed actually with the club, and they mentioned that Kim Little anecdote actually, that they did a recalculation and found that there was some more games that were missed. Again, it's down to the fact that a lot of, information gets corrupted. There's a Webb's match report. I think it's when we played Chelsea, we won 3-2. It's well known that Jen Beattie scored a hat trick in that game, and we came from 2 goals down to win 3-2. The match reporting at the time accidentally had somebody else credited as a goal scorer. And only in future reporting is it stated that Jen Beattie scored a hat trick in that game. And it's those kind of errors which are so easy. It's so easy. I mean, I make typos all the time. Anyone who's read my writing will know that. but statistical accuracy is so important, because that is the only thing we have to latch onto, and it leads to errors like goals being missed or appearances being missed, and Kim Little being miscredited or incorrectly credited for a certain amount of appearances. And unfortunately, I can only trust what I see when I go back in time until I find a better source that gives. That's another thing is when you go back in time, as I mentioned with that anecdote with the All Saints singer, I find a good stat or a good statistic and think fantastic, I'll use that, and then I'll be trawling through something else, and I'll stumble on something else, and it completely conflicts with it, and I have to choose which one do I believe. And I've got nothing to base it on, and that puts me in a really compromising position. And yeah, and then you have to make a choice and think, well, somebody scored in this game. No idea who, but I'll have to take a stab at it, and that is very annoying.
So what next then? Just finally, because this doesn't sort of strike me as a project where there's a beginning and an end. It seems like one that could just go on and on and on. But how do you sort of refine what you're doing, and how do you sort of take it to new levels? Like you say, I think working with the club seems like a massive step.
It is, and like I said, with this find we've had, we just discussed with them, and we're hoping to take it further. The problem is, the Pandora's box has been open. It's like if I had known what I was doing when I started this back in, I think it was November time last year, if I'd gone back in time and told myself, you're going to do this, you're going to do all this, I'll probably go, you know what, actually, I'll leave it because it's too much effort. But now I'm fully in. I can't stop. So what started with just Arsenal has gone on to do every FA Cup season, getting all those on Wikipedia, every Premier League Cup season, every getting over the Champions League games up and running. I'm now working on the modern day League Cup, getting every National League stuff. Trying to get as much of the English football side and English football teams getting all their seasons in, because my greatest goal, and I can't do this alone. And again, it's another shout out, but I've got the story of Arsenal penned down. But there are so many other teams that also need their stories told. Donny Bells, Wembley, who became London Bees, Croydon, who became Charlton, who have great success, who that isn't known, and their seasons and their stories need to be told. And somebody else who knows those clubs better than I do, Everton fans, Charlton fans, Leeds United fans, even Chelsea, Manchester City, I mean, the list goes on. Their stories, if they have access to the stuff I did in terms of matchday programs and match reporting and resource and know people. Someone else needs to go and tell their story through time. And I'd love to be at a point where at some point every club gets their story told from their inception to the present. It may not happen. And sadly, probably won't happen in my time, at which point it'll probably be too late. But my goal is just to get as much of these competitions in. My next goal after getting some of these is to try and do some of the non-league seasons. Might be a stretch too far for me. But then again, I thought doing every Arsenal season, and I managed to do that. So it will be until I give up altogether or lose all grip on reality. But it's been an incredible journey. I've learned so much, and the great appreciation I have is that I know people are reading it and learning it, and the players whose stories were silent for so long are actually getting spoken now, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, it's fantastic work. It really is. And anytime we're in a pub, the debates like between you and Chris and other people are good fun, and we always learn, and that's exactly what we need. You've written for the Gooner as well recently in the Champions League edition. There's an excellent piece sort of comparing Arsenal's that's right, not one but two European glories. And then in the latest edition, you've looked back to the last time Arsenal won the WSL in 2018-19. So make sure to pick up your copy of the Gooner. I don't think it's going to be on sale on Saturday, but the Champions League edition will be on sale on Wednesday and at the London City Lionesses game. And we've also got another one on the way, hopefully in time for the start of the season. So all busy. Adam, great to chat to you. I'm sure we'll have you on again, and keep up the great work.
Yes. Just should say also, just a shout out to, if you haven't already, do please subscribe to the Gooner. Do please commit to, I've put my money in for this one next season. We need, I think it's 1,000 we need. If you haven't already, and if you're loving the Gooner, because the work that yourself done, Freddie, Daisy and Izzy, it's been absolutely fantastic, and we need to keep it going. So if you haven't already, do please go online and, subscribe to the Gooner, 30 quid, and help keep this amazing institution going.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what do you get for an Arsenal shirt now? Is it 70 quid? That's 2 subscriptions to the Gooner. And Leif will always say it's better value than a half and half scarf. And you can't argue with that. Good to see you. And I won't see you the games in the near future, but hopefully not too long.
Thank you. Pleasure.